All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm going to kick us off here by giving you a little background to what's going on. And to do that, I'm going to tell you, I have a good friend, colleague of mine. Many of you probably know exactly who it is that I'm talking about, but they are extremely passionate about the topic that we're going to be covering today. And the reason why, and this might actually strike a chord or feel really familiar to some of you, um, is this that several years back, he was working at what is a pretty large communications company. And he gets word while he's there that this 477 report, this thing that's due twice a year, has become a 3-month long project. And let me repeat that, twice a year, 3-month long project, 2 times a year. So needless to say, everyone that's involved with this thing is frustrated by it, but no one really quite understands how to fix the issue. Different departments across the organization were pulling data together and then having to submit that to regulatory, who would then spend upwards of 3 weeks literally manually compiling the data and getting the format right so that it could then be submitted on time. And then everyone would just kind of hold their breath and hope that it was accurate enough to get by until the next one was due, which, do the math, the best case scenario, now we have 3 months not to worry about it. And then we're going to start the whole process over again. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is going to come directly from his experience there, where he helped to streamline and automate that process so that that 3 months could be taken back down to really, honestly, just a matter of hours when you're properly prepared for it. In today's presentation, we're going to cover a few topics that you see here. So first, we'll look at who is required to submit the fixed broadband Form 477. We'll then take a look at what challenges we regularly see while working with our partners as they get prepared to submit this report. We'll look at how the documented process, along with proper tools, can really significantly improve your organization's operational efficiency when it comes to this. Again, 3 months to 3 hours is what we're looking for. And then we're going to demonstrate how the FourSevens tool, built by GEOGRAPH specifically for ArcGIS Pro, can export a formatted report ready for you to submit right out to the FCC. All right, so if we're going to talk about who is responsible for submitting the FCC Form 477, specifically here, the one for fixed broadband, let's first outline what it is. So for those of you who don't know, I'm going to quote startyourown.isp.com here, in that, put simply, Form 477 is used by the FCC to determine which providers are servicing which areas. The information reported using the form is categorized by U.S. Census tract and block, and is the government's main source of data used for identifying underserved areas of opportunity. And this is as required by the Telecommunications Act of 1966. We're going to go on to say here that filing for both fixed broadband subscription and deployment data must occur twice annually, initially by March 1st for data points gathered through December of the previous year, and then again by September 1st for all of the data gathered as of June of the same year. So who's required to submit the report? And really that is any facilities-based providers of broadband or voice service with connections to end users. So let's talk about the challenges that those providers face now that we know who's required. So again, to kind of bring this back, after years of working with a lot of different partners of ours at many different organizations across the board, we've had a really unique opportunity to see that most of them are facing the same few challenges. And once these have been addressed, they can get back to what matters the most to them. And across the board, that's always when we talk to them, offering exceptional service to their communities, not trying to get together reports on a regular basis. So we've broken this down to the top 4 points that we're going to address right now. First, keeping up with constantly changing requirements. You'll see that to be a theme over the years. Second, the need to involve multiple departments and platforms. Third, data collection and manipulation so that report can be more easily generated. Get rid of that manual process that the regulatory department was going through, we talked about earlier. And fourth, and we've saved for last, but really in our opinion, it's the biggest pain point and can be the most easily overcome and make the biggest difference. And that's the lack of a documented process for this. All right, so the first thing that we need to be clear on before we even think about collecting and compiling all of this data is what data do I need? And as we're talking about here with changing requirements, has this data changed since the last time we submitted this report? So perfect example is what I have on the screen here that you're looking at right now. And this was what was required for the March and September 2019 report. So the first thing that you're going to see there is that we have a 15-digit census block code. Next requirement was your company's DBA name, the doing business as. Then we have the technology of transmission category. Then we have whether or not that customer is a consumer, that is residential or mass market, and that's a 0 or a 1 field, true or false. Then we have what is the maximum download speeds that are advertised or marketed to a consumer, along with the maximum upload speeds, same thing, advertised or marketed to a consumer. Then much like the one we talked about with the consumer, is whether or not this is a business or a government entity. Again, a true false field there. And then to piggyback on that, the maximum download speeds that can be achieved based on service qualification speed, and the maximum upload speeds that can be achieved based on service qualification speed. Now, if you take a look at what I've done with the image there in front of you, as of December 31st of 2019, meaning the reports that were due in March and then coming up in September of this year of 2020, this report no longer requires those last two fields we talked about. So the maximum downstream and maximum upstream that's contractual or guaranteed data throughput rates available to business or government end users in each census block. So that's something we want to know as we move forward. Now, once we know what data we need, we can move on to the next step. And so now we're going to talk about multiple departments. And let's be honest, we've all seen it. With multiple people, multiple departments, multiple software platforms involved in your day-to-day operations, and this is, in most every organization, it can be unbelievably painful when a project comes up, no less when it comes up 2 times a year, every 6 months. And then that this project requires the cooperation and communication across all of those different people and departments and software platforms. This is a problem you might feel like you'll never be able to overcome. And to be honest, I hear all the time. I hear this on a regular basis. This is just how our organization operates. Really a strategy that's going to promote open and clear communication and a clear definition of roles and responsibilities can make a huge difference. You'd really be surprised what this can do for you. And so we're going to recommend starting with the following. First off, we're going to identify all project stakeholders who will be involved in the preparation of data for FCC Form 477 filings. Some examples of stakeholders might be subject matter experts from IT or your GIS department. It could be marketing, regulatory, legal, engineering, possibly the provisioning departments. So that's going to be first. Identify all of the project stakeholders. Next, we need to agree on the definition of a service location among all of those stakeholders we just talked about. For instance, are commercial locations included or are they not? This is extremely important before you start preparing your data because it will allow you to reconcile any discrepancies that might come up from working with diverse systems of records and departments. A little side note here, this is not directly related to Form 477, but it kind of gives you an idea of how important something like the definition of a service location can be. Same friend and colleague of mine we were talking about earlier, while we were discussing this and getting everything together and some of the problems he had, he said, this is really kind of a microcosm of the issue. So we had our marketing team helping us out, deciding, helping us pick where we were going to build out next. So they were helping us with network planning essentially. And so we received word from them that there's going to be a giant build out kind of by the airport, 1,400 service locations out there. And with us knowing the local field the way that we did, he said, we knew there was no way. We had to look into what was going on. And a lot of you probably are laughing right now because you've probably been through the same thing. The service locations from the billing department can be PO boxes. There was a post office out there by the airport. There were 1,400 billing addresses, in this rural community where they all had PO boxes out there by the airport. So again, making sure that you agree on these definitions can be extremely important before you move forward. And then the third thing that we're going to talk about here is you want to set deadlines for when you need the required data back from those stakeholders. So make sure they know exactly what to give you and when it's due by. So just to kind of reiterate that, now we've defined what data we need, and we have a clear agreement on who is responsible for what and by when. So next, we're going to begin the actual process of collecting and compiling the data. So we're going to outline some steps here that you can use to do that. Again, if you're kind of looking back at that diagram of the data that we're looking for, the first thing is we need to download shape files with census blocks from the Census Bureau website. I'll have links for you for that later. And this is for your service area if you don't already have it, with the key being to make sure it includes the 15-digit census block code. Then from your internal system of record, we're going to extract qualification speeds for all possible service locations. This is for customers and non-customers. And that's going to have their physical location information, plus the geo coordinates if you have them already, and the technology of transmission type. You can code these based on the FCC requirements, which when we get to the demo of the 477 tool here in just a little bit, you'll see that we have available for you. Next, from your internal system of record, we're going to extract service locations for all your current customers and flag them as whether or not they are a consumer or business/government. We just talked about this, but let me reiterate that using a billing system to pull customer addresses might not be ideal in this situation. Then we're going to match the records with qualification speeds and technology of transmission to those records with the customer type based on service location. Then if the qualification speeds are different from the advertised or marketing speeds, we're going to collect information on which speeds are advertised or marketed in your service area. Usually we can get this information from the marketing or the sales department. And the last thing before we move on from this slide is we're going to compile all of that data into one tabular file with these fields that you see above. All right, now we're going to go to ArcGIS Pro and convert this tabular data to a point feature class, and then import the polygon feature class with our census block. So again, we'll be taking a deeper look at this in just a moment. All right, finally, if you haven't done it yet, we're going to want you to download and install the FourSevens add-in from the ArcGIS Marketplace and follow the instructions, kind of follow the wizard as you go along to complete that process. So I'm going to be demonstrating this tool in a minute. But it really, at this point in time, once you've gone through all these steps and then you've used this tool to generate the report, you're finished. And now all you need to do is go to the website and actually submit that report. Okay, so let's talk about, again, what I said will be the most important part of all of this. And that is, now that you have a plan set and you have a process in place, I want you to remember one huge thing. I'm going to say it one more time. This has to be done again in 6 months. And the stakeholders and the main players are going to change at some point in time down the line. You're not always going to have the luxury of the group that you just finished this with, and you're feeling good and patting each other on the back, having that same crew with you next time. So for that continued success year after year, and to ensure the maximum operational efficiency that we talked about earlier, so that you can continue to have this take hours instead of weeks or months, we want to make sure that we are documenting this process and keeping it current as things change over time. So we have a guide. It's called Simple Strategies for Timely and Efficient Preparation of FCC Form 477. We're going to be sharing that with everyone who attended today. And this is going to be something that's going to help you get started. So a lot of the things that we have talked about up until this point in time are going to be documented. And I want you all to keep a lookout. This is going to be coming out this coming Monday. So for those of you live here with us, that's going to be the 29th. You're going to get both that documentation that you're going to be able to keep and use, make a starting platform for your own processes and procedures. And you're also going to get a link back to this webinar. So if there's anything that we discussed that you need to see in more detail, you're going to be able to come back and do that. All right. So what we're going to do now is go ahead and take a look at that FourSevens tool that we talked about. And this is what's really going to finish out our fine-tuned and documented process, is the ability to bring the software platform in. I want you to remember this is a free tool. It's available for ArcGIS Pro. And like I showed earlier, it's available over on the Esri Marketplace. So I'll have some contact information at the end. If any of you are looking for how to get a copy of this and get it installed and get up and running, just let us know. All right, so here we are in ArcGIS Pro. What you'll note is that we have brought in that census block feature class and my service location feature class that we discussed. So I can click on these, I can see the details. Specifically, what we're looking for is the data that we talked about needing to collect, and that's the GeoID that we have here for our census block. So if I zoom in, you can see the breakout of all of our census blocks that we have and that 15-digit code. So in addition to that, again, our service locations. So if I go ahead and click on a service location here, you'll see we also have the data that we discussed there. So down here we have our technology type, service type. You can see here was a consumer, max advertised download, max advertised upload. So these are those fields that we're going to be using to map, so that then the software can do the rest of the heavy lifting for us and pull all this data together and create our 4.7 report. All right. So in order to use the tool, we're going to jump over to, you can see we have a GEOGRAPH Telecom tab, and then a tool for the FCC qualification wizard under the reports tab. Now this is going to start off the wizard. So we have select a report. If I hit the drop down and go to fixed broadband deployment. Then we're going to enter the provider's doing business as name that we talked about earlier. Now we're going to look for our census block layer and make sure to map those. So a little bit of planning on the front side makes this very simple. We're going to map our census block, Clemson as the census block layer, with our census block ID field is that GeoID. Remember, that's where that 15-digit code was. And then click next. Now we're going to do the exact same thing for our service location layer. So naming conventions on the front end made this very simple. Then we're looking for our location type. Under service type. And now we just need to match the field so that we can map these together. So again, very simple. We're going to take consumer and connect it to consumer, business government to business government. Click next. Now we're going to do the same thing with our technology field. I'm going to go down and find where we stored that information. And now we just have to match these up. Again, you can see how much planning on the front end Makes this a breeze as we go through the wizard. And then we're going to click next. Now we have our max advertised downstream and max advertised upstream. We're just going to map those two together. Click next. And then we're going to name our file and choose a location to save it. I'll name this today's date. Save. Looks like I have one named that already. We're going to go ahead and run this. And so you can see the fixed broadband deployment successfully exported, and then the location where I saved this. This is a CSV file. And if we open that up, you can see all of those fields here. So there's our 15-digit census block, our doing business as, the technology type for this particular row, whether or not this is consumer, right? We talked about that being a 1 or 0 field. Max advertised download speed. So in this case, it was 50. Max advertised upload speed. We have 5 here. And then whether or not this was government commercial. So this is now formatted and ready to submit. All right, so we're going to click OK. And now as long as we're keeping our data fresh, we're finished for this, this group of 6 months. We maybe, if this process has been kept up to date, have been able to do this in a matter of, hours rather than weeks or months. And again, you can get back to taking care of your customers instead of worrying about getting this report submitted. All right, so that's our demonstration of the software. Next, I've added a page into this presentation. I don't expect you to be able to grab all of these links right here, but I did want to make sure to show you that we do have these resources for you. So you can see there's the filing interface for the Form 477, instructions on how to file, changes. So in this case, from 2019 to 2020, what changes were made to this particular report. There's the links there for the Census Bureau, the blocks and track shape files that you'll need. And then a link for the FourSevens add-on and a link for free and paid geocoding resources. Now, all of these are also going to be available in that same guide that I mentioned earlier that we're going to send out to you. So if you're not able to grab these here, they will be coming and those will be available to you. All right, so we're going to start wrapping things up at this point in time. I do have Gray Pittman here with me, helping me out today, and he has been kind of moderating to see if any questions have come in. So I'm going to check in with him and see if anybody's had any questions up until this point in time. Anything that you'd like us to go back over? All right, and said that we do have a few, but they're actually pretty in-depth questions. So we are going to be reaching back out to those of you who did have some questions individually. So I appreciate that. If anyone else has questions, please feel free to add them, right now. And we are keeping track of those. Gray's been doing a great job of, catching those for me. And also outside of that, you can see that our contact information is up right here on the screen. So you can reach out to us direct by phone at 1-800-674-4803, or you can always reach out to us by email at sales@geograph.tech. We'd love to talk to you, so feel free to reach out to us anytime about anything we've covered today or anything else when it comes to your processes and procedures, when dealing with these reports. So again, we'll be sending out that information to you this coming Monday, the 29th. There'll be a link back to this video as well as the documentation. I really appreciate you spending the last half hour with us, and we look forward to talking to you all soon. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.